Hello and welcome to this video on symbols and translation part 2. In this video we're going to finish section 6.1 and go over the two remaining logical connectives. The next logical connective is implication. We already have seen this kind of statement in chapter 1 when we talked about non-arguments. An implication is just basically an if-then statement. And so remember that the if part has a name, it's the antecedent, and the then part also has a name, which is a consequent. So here in this example, if I study logic, then my thinking skills will improve. The antecedent is I study logic, and the consequent is my thinking skills will improve. The antecedent also expresses what's called the hypothetical situation, and the if word indicates that this is a hypothetical situation. So this means that it's something that could happen, might happen, but it's not stated as a fact, as something that happens. The consequent, on the other hand, expresses what would be a consequence if that hypothetical situation held. And this is why this is called implication, because the antecedent implies the consequent. So in terms of symbolizing this, in terms of formalizing this, if we pick L as the letter that symbolizes the antecedent, and we pick T as the letter that symbolizes the consequent, so L would symbolize if I study logic, T would symbolize my thinking skills will improve. The whole thing would look like this: L horseshoe T. So the horseshoe is the symbol here for implication. Okay, our last connective is equivalence, and equivalence is probably the most complex out of all of them. But once we break it down into its parts, it's actually not hard to see. The reason why it is complex is because it contains parts from other statements that we've already learned about. It kind of puts some of them together. So equivalence basically means the conjunction of two conditionals where the antecedent and the consequent are reversed. And this here is the symbolic form, which is read as P if and only if Q. So the triple bar that's between the P and the Q is the symbol that we're going to use to formalize, and that symbol represents the phrase if and only if. So again, it's a conjunction of two conditionals where the order of the antecedent and the consequent are reversed. So that means that P if and only if Q, that is P triple bar Q, means if P then Q, and if Q then P. Because what we have there, as you can see, is a conjunction where the P is in the antecedent position on the left, and the Q is in the consequent position on the left. And then when we look at the right, when we look at the conjunct on the right, everything is reversed. The Q now is in the antecedent position, and the P is in the consequent position. So here's an example from everyday language, from natural speech. John will graduate if and only if he completes all his units. So let's let G represent or symbolize John will graduate. Again, remember we're choosing a specific letter which is capitalized. Let U symbolize or represent he completes all his units. G, if and only if U, means if John graduates, then he will complete all his units. And if he completes all his units, then John graduates. So notice that is a conjunction of two conditionals. And notice that the order of the antecedent and the consequent are reversed. Since this is a conjunction of two conditionals, it can also be symbolized as if G then U, and if U then G. But the proper symbolization here is Again, G if and only if U, which is G triple bar U. Okay, so that is it for all the operators here. Let us take a quiz, practice quiz here with the ones that we just learned. And again, remember, your homework will be to symbolize sentences, so make sure that you are doing well with these quizzes. So I will put the 5 questions here. Try to do them on your own. Pause the video, and then you can hit play again, and then we'll go over the answers. Okay, so number 1 is basically a straightforward implication, right? If we let John studies be symbolized by S, and we let he will pass the logic exam be symbolized by P, then we have basically S horseshoe P, which is how we symbolize a implication. Number 2, notice that there's the if and only if in the middle. John exercises if and only if he goes to the gym. Remember that the if and only if is a triple bar, so that would look like this. If we let John exercises be symbolized by a capital E, and if we let he goes to the gym be symbolized by G, then this would be the appropriate symbolization, right? Okay, number 3, New York is a city given that Florida and California are not. If you think about it, what is going on here is that the given that signals a hypothetical situation, and that would be the if, right? Another way to read this is, if Florida and California are not cities, then New York is a city, right? And so that means that that we have 2 negations conjoined in the antecedent, and that's why we have the tilde F and the dot and then the tilde C. That symbolizes Florida is not a city and California is not a city, right? And then the whole thing would be if, right? If Florida is not a city and if California is not a city, then N, right? Then New York is a city. If Florida is not a city and California is not a city, then New York is a city. Okay, so number 4, Walmart sells movies if Target does. Well, again, this is a conditional, right? We could say another way to say this is, if Target sells movies, then Walmart sells movies as well, right? We let W symbolize. Let's start with T, actually. T is in the antecedent. We let T symbolize Target sells movies, and W symbolize Walmart sells movies. Then the correct symbolization would be if T, then W. And lastly, CBS shows movies unless HBO does. Okay, there are actually 2 ways of doing this. You may have you may have done one of these. If you think about it, what this is basically saying is that either CBS shows movies or HBO shows movies, right? So that would be the reason why we have C or H. C symbolizing CBS shows movies, and H symbolizing HBO shows movies. But on the other hand, if you look at the symbolization on the right, CBS shows movies unless HBO does. That does mean that if HBO does not show movies, then CBS will, right? And that's why on the right we have not H. If not H, then C. Okay, so that's it. This is what you will be doing for homework. Thanks for joining.